Okay, jumping right into it. This is part one, the overview. In November of 2012, I learned about how permaculture defines the word resiliency as a term. This caused my view of the world and ultimately the cosmos to be profoundly affected. As a result, this body of work is my attempt to relate a basic understanding of the universe as a permaculture designer and how it relates to resilient permaculture design. During the course of this lecture, permaculture's concepts of nodes, guilds, edges, and boundaries from a resiliency point of view will be redefined as energy systems and/or energy system states of expression. This way, it should be easier to see the resource exchanges that are taking place as the energy that it is. Also, what will be shown is that this energy is either in motion or not in motion by being used, transformed, or stored relative to itself and other systems or states of exchange. Also, there will be an alternate definition of the cycle of exchange we are all familiar with. You know the circle with the growth, storage, release, recharge, and growth pictured in it? Here it will be expressed as the infinity symbol on a quadrant. This better illustrates not only the cycle of exchanges taking place, but also the eventual exchange cycle of energy passing through other states of existence that will be revealed as physical fractal dimensions of one another. This infinity symbol on the quadrant will then be built into an easy-to-comprehend map, so navigating these physical fractal dimensions of energy exchange cycles is possible. Overall, you should receive a fresh permaculture design science perspective of the universe as a cycle of flowing energy all around and through us, which we happen to be an essential part of. To the ancient mystics, this energy flow would be referred to as life force or chi, with their understanding coming intuitively, derived from collective observations over time. The purpose of this exercise of intellect overall is for the great design potential of permaculture to be truly realized and maximized. For persons not practicing permaculture, the aim is to provide a now established perspective about our unique gift that is life with consciousness, and how our small part is connected with the universe that is our collective existence overall. Hopefully, this small intellectual input of energy will help with the creation and establishment of a more resilient, closed-loop, self-managed world with beneficial human energy system states co-creating the harmonious balances. Part 2. A new perspective creating a resilient design. The overall focus of this piece is on sharing how to create resilient permaculture designs and what that means to someone who practices the design science and methods that are permaculture. Starting with permaculture in brief, for those unfamiliar with it, the methods and philosophies were created by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in the mid-70s as a whole systems design method before the word holistic became coined cha-ching for popular use. It is a collection of indigenous land management practices, scientific methods, and philosophical social guidelines with a set of 46 principles and methods of practice. These principles and methods then become the foundational steps for creating things that are called permaculture designs or permaculture systems. Permaculture designs are created with the end goal to intentionally be self-managed, beneficial, closed-loop systems. permaculture designs do have an aspect of resiliency built in, and some may say the phrase resilient permaculture design is redundant. I feel these people probably have not built a permaculture design, usually a landscape, in an area with lots of variable interfaces like a city. The meaning behind resilient permaculture design, creating systems as nature, should be clearer after this lecture. Now, during the design process, a large emphasis is placed upon the observation of systems already in place, their relationship to one another, and what they have replaced over time. In fact, the design process calls for a year's worth of observation before designing, just watching and taking notes. Sadly, most of the focus touting permaculture over the last few decades by so-called trained experts has been solely on land management or ecosystem restoration. Books and articles have been written ad nauseum about food forests, rain gardens, and other specific techniques that are used by permaculture designers in the design process, but are not necessarily a permaculture system or permaculture design. This broad misconception has caused many to think permaculture is nothing more than a better way to garden or farm. This misunderstanding is so unfortunate. So, in this, let us view permaculture and its design methods as a true scientific discipline. Let us explore what it really is and is truly capable of. The primary power of permaculture and its design methods, like any scientific discipline, is in the observation of systems. Observed systems can be any or all relatable systems in place. These observed systems are really just simple or complex systems of exchange sharing various resources with one another. In permaculture design, these resource exchanging systems are abstractly referred to as nodes and guilds with edges and boundaries. However, other examples of nodes, guilds, edges, and boundaries outside of land management or ecosystem restoration can be commercial, physical, social, and intellectual, in addition to biological, just as long as there is a system of resource exchanges going on. So basically, with that, permaculture design at this point can be described as nothing more than resource manipulation, with the end goal of creating beneficial, self-managed systems as seen in nature. There are many ways to achieve this end goal of a self-managed system. You can spend lots of money and bring in outside resources to get it done quickly, or you can wait, working with nature and getting it done over time. Or you can do a little of both. Here is how to create a resilient permaculture design, the focus of this talk, which efficiently uses very little energy to achieve the intended end goal, plus other beneficial unintended results as well. As referred to earlier, nodes and guilds are the resource exchanging systems that are being observed. What are also observed are the interfaces called edges or boundaries of these exchanges. This all helps the designer to see and understand the overlap of influences in relationship or relative to one another, and where outside resources and inputs are best used in creating the design. The purpose of these observations for the resilient designer runs a little deeper. It is to be able to plan the ripple effect of a paradigm shift to the whole when the smallest part is changed or shifted, so the few inputs applied have a significantly greater effect or impact overall. So between the edges of the guilds and the nodes, and within them, what is really being exchanged? Yes, resources, but what do they represent? What are these resources really? Energy. During the exchange process, these resources of energy transform into different forms or states of existence based upon external factors that are relative in the cycle of time to one another. For example, let's say you are one of the millions of conformists who still use an internal combustion engine to drive to work and such. Your labor energy from your work is transformed into money or currency energy in the form of your paycheck. This currency energy is then transformed into fuel energy at the gas station, which is then transformed into kinetic or work energy by the engine to push the car so you can go to work. This is just one small example. I am sure if you thought about it long enough, you would be able to identify other similar types of resource exchanges. All of these similar exchanges are part of the whole system of exchanges that is our world, all interconnected, with some of these transformative cycles of exchange able to be triggered by us at will. In these instances, permaculture designs can be created to capture for reuse to maximum effect with additional triggers built in, energies released in the transformative cycles of exchanges. This method requires little effort to create and maintain powerful permaculture design systems. This is the key to unlocking the understanding behind resilient design. Now, these are all very abstract concepts that can be kind of hard for some people to visualize. So I will go easy, building upon concepts that are relatable with science that is factual. Part 3, the rules and regulations, laws to obey. In order to better navigate the mental landscape of abstract concepts, let us lay down some laws and cover some scientific truths that are accepted today. These laws come from the Bruce-Ruhl laws of the finite oscillating universe. None of these Bruce-Ruhl laws have been peer-reviewed or academically accepted as of yet, or maybe they have by someone else that I am not aware of. I created these laws in 2013 to help my mind make sense of the revelations about resilient design that I was beginning to understand, as its concepts fused with all my understandings and knowledge of our universe, both physically and metaphysically. Now, Law 1 simply states, everything in the universe is energy existing in one form or another. Existence is energy taking up space, time included. Here is the reason why I referred to looking at the resources being exchanged earlier as energy being exchanged instead. Law 2 gives limits and definable boundaries to our existence with all the energy in the universe was released at Big Bang. It is measurably quantifiable and it is finite. This second law is supported by another well-established law, the law of the conservation of energy. Here it is stated, energy is neither lost nor gained, it simply changes form. This alchemical reaction of energy cycling and moving through different forms is what the permaculture designer, in all of the exchanges between the nodes, guilds, edges, and boundaries, is truly observing. So the known and still knowable universe is finite, measurable energy in infinite states of exchange that are moving in ordered cycles of chaos. A better way to describe this exchange movement is as cycles of convection. As a construct of physical space, this energy convection must be cycling in 3 directions simultaneously, including time. Consequently, it is the reactive cycles of these states of convection that ultimately create our physical and metaphysical realities. All of these reactive cycles started with Big Bang and the birth of existence. So clearly, we should not take it for granted that the universe has already spent a great deal of energy just to produce the sun, our world, and us. So we can speculate about what God made us in whose image. Now, how is this done? Astronomy and chemistry show it has been accomplished through a 15 billion year process since the Big Bang released its energy back into the void that eventually cooled and produced stars and dust. Behold, the guild of our universe. Now, the establishment of the Big Bang and the expanding universe was pioneered with the works of Milton Humason and Edwin Hubble in the early 1900s. Consequently, the first photographs of other galaxies revealing a realm much bigger than our little world with its petty conflicts were also produced by these observonauts. Other scientific studies revealed how, through the great fusion reactors that stars are, the periodic table of elements are produced as byproducts of star fusion, becoming star ash. As different types of stars produced different elements, you yourself are comprised of the ash and dust of several billion different stars of one type or another. Again, all stars produce ash that really is energy that has been converted into physical matter. So, even though 15 billion years worth of ash production created all of our physical existence, it is and always will be energy. So, ultimately, the stars have created our world. They have created us and all of the natural elements on the periodic table as well. Stars. Ironically, the energy converted into matter that has come alive on our world, comprised also of energy converted into matter, requires a star or sunlight to be alive. So, how does it feel to be solar-powered stardust? Pretty cool, huh? Even cooler is how this sunlight energy is stored as various biology. So with the food chain, another system of energy exchange, life can live in the absence of sunlight, such as the deep ocean or subterranean in caves. Now, this chunk of cosmological truth and its importance to the designer will make sense a little later when we are discussing energy cycles and how they relate to the design process. Part 4. OIC. Observing infinite cycles. Oh, I see. Now backing up a little to the concept of truth, that the universe is nothing more than energy taking up space, we are reminded that all things in existence are inherently residue from all the energy released at the source point of E, or Big Bang. For the math geeks, here are some equation variables I have created to represent this as a minimum and maximum amount of energy in the universe. The important thing to the permaculture designer is that this is the beginning or start point for all the convection cycles of energy throughout the whole of existence. Why is this important? Physical matter, the stuff we work with and grow to eat, first started as energy, then was transformed. So with this perspective, balanced shared energy systems are what permaculture designers are really designing. Not only did physical matter first start out as energy, but time did as well. Time, here and then, is a physical energy expression that is also moving in cycles and must be a direct analog of our 2D shadow as a physical energy expression, requiring a comparable amount of energy to create. This is what allows for predictions to be made of stable, perceivable convection cycles of energy exchanges. As an example, weather predictions were made using current observations and recorded observations, time, to predict the outcomes of patterns called forecasts, although these forecasts were not always accurate. It is weather, and like all other energy cycles, it is truly chaotic and unpredictable, which is also something that has been revealed by time. Wait a minute. It is weather, like all other energy cycles, and it moves in convection cycles, exchanging energy with other stable energy exchanging systems. Is there a connection? Mystics have claimed intuitive understanding of these energy exchange concepts, giving it analog names, but can it be explained or expressed as a mathematical construct? Turns out there are equations that plot and graph the convection cycles of the weather. They are called the Lorentz equations. They were created to plot atmospheric convection cycles moving in 3 directions simultaneously, with a mathematical viewpoint that all cycles of energy convection are directly relatable, yet separate systems identical to one another. The Lorentz equations can be applied universally to all forms of energy convection cycles. This means as long as the cycle of energy in whatever state or form is measurable or able to be quantified, it can be visualized either physically or intuitively with the plotted outcomes of the Lorentz equations called the Lorentz or butterfly effect. This also means that since we are dealing with physical energy as a directly relatable yet separate system identical to one another, these energy cycles must be a fractal. So if physical energy is a fractal of itself, fractal dimensionality must also be physical, and more will be explained about that later on. Now, why is it important to be able to see the Lorentz butterfly effect, either physically or intuitively? What is the point of it to a permaculture designer? Energy stores and shift points. That is what is important. When the plotted variables are graphed out, an image appears that reveals all the paths, patterns, and speeds of convection the variables are traveling as cycles in 3 directions simultaneously, creating an eye at the center of the convection cycles. This eye at the center represents a point of no convection as stored energy in some form or another. The bigger the eye, the larger the stored energy value there is in that system. So let us assign the no convection as stored energy a mathematical value we will call 0 convection, or no convection within this energy exchange cycle. The other significance of no convection as stored energy is it becomes a positive or negative gravitational attractor. This positive or negative gravitational attractor becomes a focus that overall affects and/or influences other relative systems and system states of exchange. All this means is that the energy in motion wants, needs, or is attracted to the stored energy. The larger the value of energy stores, the greater the attractive force. For the nerds, here is the stored energy with the gravitational attractor values factored in, so the new value of stored energy is represented as plus or minus zero convection. The other important factor of the I is its direct relationship to the space of no convection outside the paths of the convection cycle. This direct relationship between the I of the Lorentz effect and the relative space outside the plotted convection cycle is what I became aware of while attending a lecture on permaculture's definition of resiliency by Owen Habletzel in 2012. After a few months of synthesis and years of trying to figure out an explanation, I came to some solid conclusions that led to this energetic understanding you are hopefully absorbing. This relationship between the I inside the convection and without will be discussed in more depth later on as a physical fractal dimension. Eventually, this gravitational attractor force will attract or cause a means for a point of stored energy, plus or minus zero convection, to begin cycling again, releasing energy stores either quickly or slowly back into the overall system of exchanges. These quick or slow releases are based upon other variables as external forces or triggers from other cycles, but ultimately, energy will always move from storage to exchange to storage at some point during the infinite cycle of finite stores. So the Lorentz equations can show the stores of energy we permaculture designers are looking for to power a system shift to a new state. But they also show another important conceptual tool, the path of energy flowing in its convection cycle. Here, observations can reveal shift points within a system set of systems in relation or relative to one another. A shift point changes the convection cycle enough, triggering energy to be released from stores or the release cycles to collectively change overall. For an example of a shift point, let us think of a typical suburban yard. There are trees and bushes with flower beds full of various attractive plants, plus grass. Lots and lots of grass. From a visual standpoint, it is a really pretty scene. But this is what, as a society, we are conditioned to believe. From an energy convection cycle standpoint, however, this system of a suburban yard is not very stable. A huge amount of energy inputs go to maintain the state that we see, and any disruption to these inputs quickly yields a shift to a new and typically undesirable state. Its only major return is aesthetics to feed the ego. There are no energy stores in the form of a seed bank. A good portion of the plants have to be replaced every year, brought in from outside resources, and fertilizers have to be applied because the leaves that fall, protect, and recharge the ground are removed from the system, among the other obvious energy expenses I will leave out. So, a beneficial intended shift point of this system state would be someone new moves in. They change the flow of energy. Let's say by adding some fruit and nut trees. leaving the ground cover to lay, or they collect it, then compost it for reuse on site. And then adding seed-producing fruits, vegetables, and leafy greens that can be easily replaced if they don't grow back into the flower beds. The end result is the same yard, aesthetically pleasing, but now it uses fewer inputs, produces food, thus giving back its energy a little more efficiently, and by producing seeds for a seed bank, that is a form of storing energy. Shift points can be defined as this: a point in converging cycles of energy convection relating to one another as separate system states of exchange, where a change in the parameters, either natural or intentional, causes a point of stored energy to release stores of energy back into the exchange to counter the change in the parameters, thus accounting for all energy, thereby creating a new stable system to match the new definable balanced parameters. Big long-winded definition. So in relation to our example, not bad for an intended system shift. However, it is important to state and make very clear that in nature, systems shift into new stable states all the time, but not always into a stable state we would like, desire, or want. Desertification through drought because of a change in weather patterns is a good example of this kind of natural shift. The importance of a shift point in the permaculture design process is intentional releases of stored energy can be confined to just one system or shared system of exchanges, as is the common method used by most designers. But it can be purposely designed to ripple out, causing releases of stored energy in other much larger or seemingly unrelated system states of energy exchange, amplifying the overall effect of the initial trigger for release. When this amplified shift occurs, it is called dynamic system shift. A trigger or shift point that has a true potential of causing a dynamic system shift is called a key shift point. Key shift points that require very little energy when compared to the overall inputs and outcomes to initiate are what a resiliency permaculture designer is looking for, as this is the secret of how to create a resilient design. The fewer the inputs or amount of energies to complete, that means build or make manifest, a design that triggers a dynamic system shift to a more mutually beneficial state, the harder it is for that system or system state to be changed back or to be transformed into something else again. Ergo, the more resilient the design. This is because all the system states of exchange benefiting from the new stable state of exchange add all their collective energy values to the resistance value used when calculating the system's resistance to change. Here is resiliency as defined by permaculture. Part 5. OIC with my third eye. Observing infinite cycles with my third eye. I'm getting a little esoteric and metaphysical here. Okay. We see the paths, intersects, shift points, and point of no convection representing stored energy, all represented by the Lorentz butterfly effect of the Lorentz equations. But we are talking about resilient permaculture design. What is the relevance here of knowing about the convection cycles of energy moving in 3 directions simultaneously? Now, allow me to get a little esoteric here. Permaculture design observes the cycles and patterns of nature, creating designs that not only enhance but mimic nature. It is in this mimicking of nature that why knowing about these convection cycles of energy is important. As was stated earlier, all things in existence are energy existing in one form or another. All things are and are part of a system state of energy exchanges in physical convection or moving in 3 directions simultaneously. So every permaculture design is really an energy exchange system design with co-supportive systems put into place to make it a self-managed, closed-loop, beneficial energy exchange system. How to make sense of all of this is with the concept of fractal dimensionality I mentioned earlier. Now, for a long time, mathematicians have declared nature designs using fractals, and then proceed to show plotted out computer simulations that look close but really are not natural design. Nature uses a much more sophisticated program called DNA, and has had a few years head start. I, as a bushman, can most of the time, clearly see a simulation by math versus nature's grand design. I have also declared repeatedly, only book geeks would believe nature designs using fractals. So I am either a book geek or I was wrong and behaving a little arrogantly. Perhaps a little both. Nature does design using fractals, not as a theoretical mathematician would say, but rather in the form of all the collective physical cycles of energy exchanges existing as the convection systems of system states of convection that ultimately account for all the energy in the universe, again, time included. These energy convection cycles, which can be represented by the Lorentz effect, are identical representations of one another as exchanges in different states of expression, or to say it simply, they are fractal dimensions of themselves. Also, with the cycles of convection being comprised of physical energy as some form, fractal dimensionality then must also be a physical space as physical fractal dimensions of energy and cycles of convection moving 3 directions simultaneously. In dealing with fractals, let us use the Bruce-Ruhl modified Mandelbrot definition of a fractal and its dimensions, which is a shape made of parts similar to the whole in some way, infinitely expressing itself within finite space. Switching it up a bit to use terms we have already discussed so there is a better understanding, let us modify it again and say this: an energy convection cycle entirely made of energy convection cycles relatable to the whole in some way infinitely expressing itself within a finite space. I will call this the Bruce-Ruhl definition of the physical fractal dimensional universe. Sounds like the universe has another definition, but now as fractal dimensionality, only this one has a dimensional map. Yep, I did say this definition has a dimensional map. It is a map to fractal dimensionality, and I believe I have created it. This way, permaculture systems designers can design with foresight, ahead of the flow, having systems in place to capture and store for use the energy before it is abundant, like putting out a measured amount of water catchment under the downspout before the rainstorm comes, because not only do you see it coming over the horizon, you know exactly how much water it is going to produce. Plus, this map is simple to use and to understand, so anybody can navigate the complex multi-layered systems of exchanging energy cycles that is physical fractal dimensionality unfolding existence before us. Now let us open our third eye. Starting with the cycle of exchange you are all familiar with, of the circle showing the different stages of nature. That would work if all the exchanges represented were all single closed circuits, but they are not. Exchanges share energy in through cycles and out through cycles, infinitely. So the cycle of exchanges will be modified with the infinity symbol to show the infinite cycle of exchanges of stored energy. Now let us go through the stages as an infinity symbol of exchange with an appropriate examples and corresponding equations. This is the first part of the map and the whole of the map as well. Starting with the growth phase, mathematically it can be defined as a point of plus or minus no convection, a point of stored energy, begins and increases in non-convection, becoming an increasing influence as a gravitational attractor. Growth can be described as a pine tree grows into maturity from the sapling. Storage is the phase we see most often, as it comprises all physical matter. Everything solid and tangible is a form of stored energy. Here, storage can be defined as a point of no convection becomes stable with predictable results on neighboring systems. It can be described as genetic blueprints and sugar stores are locked away in a seed with many seeds in the pine cone. Release happens when a point of stored energy, plus or minus zero convection, is forced to change negatively in response to the external parameters of other convection cycles and or system states of exchange. When this occurs, the point of stored energy releases just enough energy, sometimes all, to achieve equilibrium. It is described as environmental conditions are just so that the pine cone opens up and are dropped from the tree, shedding seeds on the ground. In the recharge phase, a new stable state exists for points of plus or minus zero convection or stored energy to either appear or begin to grow again, capitalizing off released energies. With the value of 1 in the equation equal to the whole of available energy of the system, the recharge phase can be described as the seed sprouts, first using sugar stores to live and grow until the roots have penetrated the ground where more nutrient resources for growth are available. How about some other examples we can see that are relevant? Here's a favorite, lightning. In order for the energy cycle of lightning to be created, lots of other energy exchange cycles have to take place. But keeping it simple, dry air rises through a cloud mass, generating a static charge until, zap, boom, lightning and thunder are produced as the release. As long as the conditions are right, there is sufficient energy, lightning will continue to be produced. A forest fire follows the same pattern. The plant biomass grows until a point of equilibrium is achieved where it remains stable. Then all of a sudden there is a zap boom, crackle crackle of a lightning-induced forest fire. Here lots of energy is released as light, heat, smoke, and ash. From the ashes, the residual rhizome and seed bank return the biomass, making use of the now mineral and nutrient-rich soils. Sometimes, however, that is not always the case. For example, if the forest fire was caused because of drought conditions, it may be a long while before the forest regrows again. Other than natural examples, there are socio-economic ones as well, like the American cities along the Great Lakes of North America. Their economies, communities, and prospects looked solid and assured in the post-World War II environment of the globe. Opportunity for all to live the American dream seemed never-ending. A few decades later, though, as other nation-states rebuilt their industrial sectors and began competing again on the open market of free exchange, the fat, overconfident cities began to decline into ruin. Profit generation for the greedy always follows the path of easiest creation. Without any countermeasures in place to offset this loss of manufacture, what is left behind is the shattered, rusting infrastructure of former powerful industry as the backdrop to blighted and depressed neighborhood communities. So much for the prospects looking assured now. A good example of when a system shifts into a state we may not want, like, or desire. On a more positive note, let us look at hydroelectric. Stored energy in the form of a reservoir, often called a lake, is slowly released through a dam to spin turbines that generate electricity, energy, for us to use. Smart consumers can then capture this energy for reuse in portable electronics stored in the form of a rechargeable battery. So here, water energy can be seen directly spinning a CD player or powering a make-yourself-smarter phone, so someone can post and respond to mindless dribble with prejudices amongst global social media groups. See the subtle example with an example here. A grand example we touched on earlier were the stars in creating elements. These elements are then released through many means, but the most glorious is the supernova. With this high energy death of a star, not only are the elements blown out into the universe, but the nebulosity left behind often becomes a means by which brand new stars can be created and born into existence as nature's cosmic womb. The last example I wish to use is thought energy, intellectual power. What we as humans zealously perceive to be truth and right can drive us to do very selfish, ugly, and mean things. Conversely, things we genuinely know to be true and right can drive us to create elegantly sophisticated works of art, design, intellect, and influence. In these energy cycles of intelligence, the outcomes of the struggle between mythology and science, prejudice and awareness, or fear and understanding, can be seen in the unbiased records of history or in the stores of time as energy. This is how we learn, and if our species chooses to self-destruct, how other intelligences may possibly learn about us. In your watching this, you are absorbing the intellectual energy of a vast source. It is comprised of all the intellectual energy from others I have learned from, plus my own thoughts, musings, experiences, and experiments. This is how knowledge and wisdom are built over time as generational compilations of intellectual energy stores. Knowledge here really is power. Libraries, both physical and digital, are massive stores of this intellectual energy that allows one person to speak to multitudes of generations long after death. Advances in art, philosophy, science, and technology are dependent upon these energy stores, as is our overall awareness of the world and the universe around us. To illustrate the devastation to our potential as a species of the loss of just one of these energy stores, you have to look no further than the religiously sanctified destruction of the Library of Alexandria after 700 years worth of collecting and storing knowledge from all around the then known world. It is truly saddening that such a simple act could be so culturally, technologically, and historically disastrous. So there are several examples of the energy cycle of exchange in different forms. All forms of energy go through this infinite cycle of exchange at some point. All energy system states are comprised of several collective sets of energy convection cycles, and as a whole system state, go through their own convection cycle. So the symbol of the infinite cycle of exchange can be represented as itself over and over, or as a physical fractal dimension of energy cycles. The purpose of this recap is now the energy exchange interfaces can also be seen in this diagram forming a ladder. I call this map the Fractal Complex Systems Ladder. It is a simple construct that shows how a shift in energy during the growth or release phase in one cycle of exchange can affect the next larger cycle of exchange it is a part of and interfaced with, and how this can ultimately affect a whole system of allowable energy. Additionally, it can be seen that the reverse is true as well. Whatever happens to an exchange system state directly affects all other exchange systems equally that are a part of that system state. For the purpose of relating to the levels, it can be demonstrated as such. The nano level is, let's say, a cell in the organ of the body. The next system is, of course, the organ, followed by the whole body. Lastly would be all the biology on the world. This is just an example of how to use the map. Once you get to the point of the whole system, it then becomes the nano level for the next fractal dimension out or in. In sharing this understanding of a new way to do permaculture design, I propose to take it over the top a little. So, if you please, bear with me. What has been created here is the working model for physical fractal dimensionality as the convection cycles of all the energy released at the Big Bang. All these convection cycles of energy also happen to move relative in motion or speed to one another, including the energy convection of time. Lastly, since energy was released into space, it cannot move any faster than itself at creation, or Big Bang. Now, tapping into the intellectual energy store of science, I would like a law to universally govern this working model. Einstein wrote a theory that dealt with the relative speed of moving objects and the speed of light. This is well known as his special theory of relativity, and the speed of light was the fastest you could go. Building on his work, I say Einstein was looking at light and seeing energy in one form. Also, the reason light speed is a universal speed limit comes from the Big Bang release I stated earlier, as it is this energy, not light, that cannot move faster than itself. So being bold and in need of a law to govern the model, and this model is one of physical energy moving at different speeds and cycles as cycles relative to one another, I declare this: Einstein's law of special relativity, with time included as part of the energy cycles. This shall be the law and the rule to govern the simultaneous convection cycles of physical fractal dimensionality that infinitely oscillate a finite amount of energy that is our universe. Now, returning to the topic, the point of all of this to a permaculture designer is this is how nature designs the entirety of existence. Resilient permaculture design is natural design, responding beneficially to dynamic changes in nature, either positive or negative, using with the utmost efficiency inputs available. With this method, we can see all the deeper interconnected relationships and can create designs that have a deeper or larger impact for the amount of energy put in. It also allows for focused resiliency to be built into the overall design, making the new stable state even harder to change again. I talked about key shift points earlier, and here again we will see the importance to them in the design process for causing a dynamic system shift to one we would consider beneficial or more favorable. In affecting the cycles of exchanges, the more physical fractal dimensions affected, the more dynamic the shift, the greater the outcomes, and we as free-willed creatures can then shift dynamically ourselves. There are limits to how much a system will shift, however. A dynamic system shift affects all states of convection within a maximum allowable space of effect equal to available energy released from stores. And all the energy released from these stores has to be accounted for. So in creating our resilient permaculture designs, we can intentionally, on purpose, create systems that require comparatively little inputs to build or make, and set key shift points up like dominoes. This way, when one is pushed, they all eventually fall in some order, releasing the energy stores in a directed manner, completing, powering, and stabilizing the final design. Additionally, we can choose the beneficial outcomes that affect the whole of the system. Yes, you really can choose the positive outcomes to take place as if you were designing your own destiny and the destiny of everybody else around you. That way, no matter how small the design, once built, it will positively affect the whole over time. If done right, automatically included in the resilient designs are the parameters for when the system unintentionally shifts again, either slowly or quickly, allowing the intelligently designed system itself to shift in harmony and beneficially as nature to this new stable state. Part 6, conclusion. So, are there any actual examples of this being done? Oh, most certainly yes. One of the most well-known system creators for shift, or system shift, is Sepp Holzer and his entourage of students. Their work on greening the desert is revitalizing back into existence ecosystems that disappeared ages ago. And they've been a desert for so long, none remember them as lush and green. But history, it does. His energy inputs may seem large, but when compared to all the energy inputs that created the desert state and keep it stable, they are small. The return for running his tractors and dozers are not only the beautiful biodiverse ecosystems, but they are resilient, new, stable ecosystem states. For a smaller example, there is the Whirlwind Farm, where a talk on its success story is how I first learned about resiliency. After a year's worth of observation and study of the region's ecohistory, a thoughtful, resilient plan was made. It called for knocking down a small earth berm that diverted water, and a few hours of keyline plowing, and then wait for the rain. This was done, and when the rains came, seeds washed into the disrupted field soil from the upslope seed bank, and the water washed out all the mineralizing salts. The end result was, after one rain season, a new, biodiverse, resilient ecosystem in a stable state. Again, those are land management examples. But as I stated earlier, it can be used for any system. For example, an economic system. Our design firm, Bruce-Ruhl Design, Ideas and Productions, LLC, several years ago created a business model known as the Leisure Lawn Cooperative Farm. It was designed with the intention to solve the climate issue, the unemployment issue, the food crisis issue, and require no money to start. 3 years later, we are still building the farm, developing farm sites, and last year, 2016, did our first bit of food production for seed store and propagating to other farm plots. The Leisure Lawn Cooperative Farm is a democratically run cooperative industry that has the ability to be easily replicated by any persons wishing to build the farm. And ultimately, we intentionally, purposely created the farm to create jobs for permaculture designers so that they didn't have to leave the city. Another example, how about a sustainably sourced vehicle? My truck I have renamed Uncle Ben's Niece after an inspiring bus named Uncle Ben. Google search it. She is a 1986 Toyota 4x4 that I purchased in 2000, whose engine will soon be converted at the cost of a used car to electric. To make it closed loop, there will be a methane-fired electric generator, portable, behind the cab. This methane-fired electric generator will be used to recharge the batteries. For self-sustainability, I produce my own biogas with a small portable biodigester, again of my firm's design. The end result is an electric vehicle that I produce my own fuel to generate electricity for. Some may argue different points, a main one being, not everyone has a biodigester, and that will soon change as well when the one my company has designed hits the market. Another system shift. The point here is, however, technology can be affected by resilient permaculture design. This way, industry can be affected overall as well. Imagine what would happen if people started living more independently and self-sufficient. Instead of imagining, why not find out by doing? I will end this intellectual exercise with this piece of wisdom I acquired from my teacher, whose name is the forest. Now that you see, you must do. Nature itself will hold you personally accountable as a failure if you do not. To nature, accountability for failure means extinction. Thank you.